I spoke earlier with Theodore Kattouf, a former U.S. ambassador to Syria.
We have virtually 100 or more opposition groups that had to sign on to this deal. I don't think the president of Syria, Bashar al-Assad, is that enthusiastic about it. He had to be kept on a tight leash by the Russians, I believe, because his troops have been making gains. So to get through the first 3 days with, it's not perfect, but with a greatly reduced number of casualties and incidents is remarkable.
And so many besieged cities, so many people struggling within that country, and the thought of UN aid actually getting to them, that's also a positive, correct?
It is, and aid from the UN, the Red Cross, is getting into some of the worst besieged areas in Syria, so that's a big plus as well.
The talks in Geneva, can you move the ball down the field, I guess is the question.
Well, that's the big and unknowable question. You know, Russia really has a lot of influence in this situation in that it has reversed the fortunes of the regime in a good way for the regime and a bad way for the opposition. And so the Russians have some chits to call in. So if they want Assad to sit down in Geneva and not sabotage what's been going on, I think he probably has to do it, but he's probably hoping the opposition gives him an excuse to back out.
And you've got 97 groups, as you mentioned. You've got the wild cards. You've got all these neighboring countries. Turkey obviously has a vested interest in all of this. I mean, it's so fragile. Talk to me about some of the hurdles that need to be overcome moving forward.
Well, you're right. The Syrians are not masters of their own fate. And some people say, well, it's the Russia and the United States that are calling all the shots. Well, that's not really true either. You have Turkey with its own interests just north of the border. And the Turks seem more obsessed with what the Kurds are doing in Syria and the gains they're making, much more than they seem worried about ISIS or other radical groups. And so their number one priority seems to be to keep the Kurds from dominating the border areas. And Saudi Arabia doesn't appear all that happy with this. I think the U.S. is exerting a lot of influence with the Saudis to go along with all of this, but they don't like the gains that Assad has made at the expense of some of their clients as well.
And Turkey's president noted that the cessation actually only covers about a third of Syria. Is that likely to expand, do you think?
Well, the reason it covers only a third is because ISIS controls large swathes of the desert. And a good part of Syria is desert, and of course, it's not just desert. And the Nusra Front, which I think actually Turkey has some sympathy for, it's an offshoot of Al-Qaeda, is in the northwest of Syria. So, and the Russians have said, and we've agreed, that they can continue to hit those two groups just as we'll continue to hit ISIS.